This new Cold War 2.0 that we have happening between the US and China is all part of this great power competition. And it all comes down to the fact that China is a challenge to both US unilateralism and US economic domination around the globe. So this is like what empires do. And of course, for the US, it's all in the name of freedom. But I think one of the central aspects to understand about this new Cold War against China is that a lot of it has to do with technology, because China is at the forefront of 5G. Huawei is the world's leading provider of networking equipment. Its smartphone is the best seller outside the US and European countries. We're considering Huawei-based infrastructure for their 5G wireless networks. And I mean, whoever controls the future of communication kind of controls the future. So this is a huge threat to the US because China's way ahead of the US and will likely be the world leader in 5G technology, which would be a huge economic and technological loss for the US and its companies. So this is one of the reasons you keep hearing this accusation from the US about intellectual property theft. It's really just about the fact that Chinese companies like Huawei have been able to go beyond what the US can do in this technology. So that's why you hear people like, from the right to the left, from Republicans to Democrats, from Elizabeth Warren to Mike Pompeo, consistently accusing China and its companies of stealing from American companies. It's just not true. It's just like political expediency to explain away why the US is behind in this technology. And it's also a way, this whole idea of blaming China and saying intellectual property theft is also a way to garner support from American workers by scapegoating China for jobs being shipped overseas instead of blaming the actual culprit, which is capitalism and big corporations lobbying for corporate-friendly anti-labor trade deals that move American jobs to countries where labor is cheaper. So these accusations of intellectual property theft and of China stealing our jobs that you hear again from Republicans and Democrats and that you're going to start hearing more and more is all ultimately a part of America's defense strategy, or I should say military strategy. There was even a recent paper for the Pentagon that said the US should advocate for aggressive protection of US technology intellectual property rights in an effort to slow down China's telecommunications ecosystem expansion. That is a direct quote. So this is literally a part of Pentagon strategy. So what's really happening is that China's own industries are powerful enough that they're starting to challenge their foreign Western counterparts. So the US is whining about this big, bad, menacing Chinese yellow peril because China may have pulled ahead of American tech giants in wireless technology. And then another reason that the US is becoming so vehemently anti-China is ramping up this Cold War also has to do with the fact that China is starting to create new financial infrastructure to get around the US dollar, which is the world reserve currency. So basically, China's creating mechanisms that can undermine the US government's traditional methods of control and coercion. And that's a huge red flag, a huge no for the US empire. So the US isn't going to tolerate this kind of challenge to its economic dominance, which is why you see, again, this unified bipartisanship against China from both Democrats and Republicans. And I think one of the most important things to understand also about why the US sees China as such a huge threat on top of this sort of economic side of things is also the ideology. China is offering an alternative model to US neoliberalism, particularly for developing countries. They were able to pull all these people out of poverty in China with their economic model, their centralized planned economy, and develop their middle class and take care of people while still making themselves a crucial part of the global economy. China's crucial to the way the world economy functions. And so by just merely offering an alternative, that's enough to challenge US hegemony and US empire. Because China can go around and, create these business partnerships with other countries where they don't have these neoliberal strings attached, these conditions attached like the US. That's why you see the US running around the world, threatening even their own allies. If you do business with China, we're going to take, things away from you. And then lastly, I'll add that China is also a useful excuse for the military industrial complex to continue giving, justifications for why they need to expand. You need like this constant boogeyman to keep making money. And China's the new boogeyman to justify this bloated military budget. And I think it's interesting because like one of the reasons you're also seeing this Cold War with China ramp up, it was already happening, but I think COVID kind of accelerated it, because COVID accelerated America's decline. I mean, you also saw between the way America handled COVID and the way China handled it, you saw two very different styles of governing and the way they work in a global pandemic. And the US system failed and is failing, like in a devastating and embarrassing way on the world stage, whereas China was able to control this virus and was actually able to kind of keep its economy moving. So I think that's also, demonstrated to the world in many ways, like an example of how the US system is a failure and China could actually offer something that works. It is also, I think speaks very badly for capitalism. What's the US going to be doing down the line is they're going to be using these issues like Hong Kong and Xinjiang to attack China. These sort of what the US always does. They always go after their adversaries by trying to play the human rights card. And so I think it's very important that people always look to these issues with a skeptical eye and really ask questions about the way the media is reporting on these kinds of places, because the propaganda war against China, for all the reasons I explained, is going to heat up pretty dramatically. And it's going to make what we saw in Syria look like child's play. So people need to be prepared for that, because the US is funding opposition groups that want to basically, cut China up into pieces. And so far, the media is following suit without asking questions at all and just playing stenographer for the Pentagon and for the State Department. And we're going to see more of that under a Biden administration.